Well, hi everyone. Thank you for being here. And I know some of you are still continuing to join, so that's perfectly fine. Roll on in. We're just getting started. Thanks for joining. I am Cheryl Rosenberg. Some of you might know me. A lot of you might be new. I am an associate director in the Career Center here at Tufts. I work with all students exploring lots of different things. And I also get to work with the career community, nonprofits, social impact, and education. So if you are interested in some of those sectors or intersections with those sectors, we've probably met before. And I also want to mention Kelly Roberts, our advisor in the Career Center for Careers in Government, International Relations, and Law. So Kelly's not on screen with us today, but many of you know her and was instrumental in putting together today's event. So wanted to make sure to mention her so that you all know Kelly and I are both resources for you all here on campus. So like I mentioned, we're recording this session. Today is September 27th of 2022, and we're talking about careers in international affairs. So as we get started, we're all here today to learn about careers in international affairs, and we're joined by Carmen Mezzera, who is the executive director of the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. And Carmen will be talking about, many possibilities within the international affairs community. And she'll be giving an overview of career paths, and we'll talk about skills and even how to apply for some jobs. So I'm going to turn it over to Carmen, and she'll take it away.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Kelly in absentia, and thanks to all of you for joining us here today. As Cheryl said, my name is Carmen Mezzera, and I'm Executive Director of APSIA. We are the community for all of the graduate schools worldwide that specialize in professionally focused international affairs. So some of you, of course, may know the Fletcher School at Tufts. That's one of our founding members. But we are a community in 18 countries, and I'll talk a little bit at the very end about graduate school if you think that's going to be part of your journey. But really, our topic here today is about the many professional pathways. And so one thing I want to invite everybody to do is, if there's a burning question that you absolutely do not want us to leave without touching on, or something that brought you here today that you really want to hear about, feel free to send me a direct message or Cheryl a direct message or post it in the open chat, whatever you're comfortable with. I want to make sure that we have a chance to get you the content that you want to leave with. And I'll also give you my contact information at the end. So if you're not comfortable or you think of it at 2 o'clock this morning, please feel free to reach back out. So let's jump right in and get started. What are the many different pathways? Well, for good or for ill, the field is huge. We talk about international affairs as an interdisciplinary space. So it's got language and politics and history and culture and economics and business, and all of these different aspects come together both within the study of international affairs and within the professional opportunities that are going to be available to all of you. Many of you may know about some of the classic pathways like diplomacy or defense or development, but there is an international affairs aspect to so much more than that. The energy sector, the science and technology field, security, intelligence, business, communications, law, education, all of these have an international affairs element to them and offer you, no matter what kinds of things you might be studying, a professional pathway forward to link together those pieces and have an international affairs career. Broadly, you'll hear me talk about 4 big buckets, just as a way to kind of simplify this space. We'll talk about the public sector, which is local, state, national governments. We'll talk about the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and what I'll call the multilateral sector. So the UN, the World Bank, the IMF. Lots of our graduates move regularly between all of those sectors, but in some ways too, they are sort of different choices. So if you're debating between them, or if you'd like to talk more about some of the particulars of those pieces, I'm happy to do that during Q&A as well. So how might you know if this is a good place and a good space for you? Well, maybe you want to use your professional energy to tackle some of the big problems that are facing our world. Poverty, climate change. I think disease is one that has become very personal and very relevant in a lot of people's lives. So maybe that's the professional pathway you want to be on. Not what you do in your spare time, not what you do as a side project, but really how you use your professional life and your professional energy. Maybe you want to help people and you feel called to service and to use that professional space to help people move forward in their everyday lives. Maybe you're curious about the world and you want to explore and travel and eat all the amazing food that's out there. And that's a key piece that you want your professional life to feature, those different elements of travel and language and culture. Maybe you've seen how policy choices in the state level and the local level and the federal level impact people's everyday lives. And you either want to be the decision maker or the person influencing what the decision maker does with those policy choices. And that's how you want to use your professional space. Maybe you're like me and you just like to argue, right? You love that back and forth and the chance of really changing somebody else's mind, or maybe occasionally having your own mind changed. And you love that exchange of ideas and information. And that's a key feature you want your professional life to have. And even if you're not sure about any of those pieces, maybe you just feel called to something bigger than yourself. And you want to use your time, use your skills, use your capacity to play a role in leaving the world better than you found it. And whether it's any of these or some other factor, there is a place and a space for you in the professional fields of international affairs. So lots and lots of different possibilities. What kinds of things can be combined? And this is not just specifically about what you're majoring in. It can be what your interests are, what sorts of questions really drive you. And I'm not going to read this slide to you, I promise, but I'll make sure that Cheryl and the team have this list afterwards. But what you can see is that lots of different possibilities can combine together for an international affairs career. And if you feel torn because you say, oh, but I really care about this and that at the same time, we can talk during Q&A about some questions you can ask yourself to do some discernment and figure out which of these pathways may make sense for you. But just as an example, maybe you love to write, or you're studying journalism, or you have a real interest in those tools, and you're curious about a particular part of the world. You can put those two pieces together and be a human rights monitor who uses the tools, who uses the skills of clear, concise, accurate, factual writing to tell the story about what's really happening in a place and reveal that to the world, or tell the story back to a government or to a business about what's truly going on. Maybe you have a real interest in a love of computer science or information science and technology, and you want to combine that with training in international affairs to go on offense and bring the fight to folks in the cyberspace. Maybe you want to do it on defense and protect against misinformation or protect against hacking. All of those kinds of pieces can be combined together. Maybe you love economics and want to link that with study of politics and work on trade negotiations for a company or for a government. All of these different pieces can be put together to build a successful, globally focused career. So again, I'll share this list with folks later, but what I want you all to remember is how big the space is and how many different angles you can come at this with. So again, we can talk later if you're struggling with doing the discernment to figure out what path makes sense for you. Regardless of which of those fields or which of those 4 big buckets you're interested in, I think there are 5 fundamental things that everybody needs in order to be successful. And again, that's in the public sector, private, nonprofit, multilateral. I would argue everybody needs these basic building blocks. The first one is some professional experience. I know some of you are freshmen and some of you are seniors. All of you, I would argue, can benefit from understanding how an office works, what it's like to have a boss, what it's like to have coworkers and teammates, all of that kind of exposure to just the functionality of a professional space. In a perfect world, which I know we don't live in, you'd also be able to do that in an environment that mixes together different cultures and different places, because it's a really different dynamic when you have different people, different languages, different understandings of how power works and how bosses work. So that exposure to professional life, especially in an international context, is a really critical skill that's going to benefit you no matter what kind of job you might have or organization you might be working for. The second key pieces, I would argue, are about the ability to communicate well and clearly. So to be able to do that in writing, in our field in particular, writing is so fundamentally critical. So being able to take all of the information that you know about a particular subject, and not put it out maybe in an 80-page paper like you would in class, but put the same amount of information that would be in that 80-page paper in a page and a half. Can you tell me all that you know about that subject clearly and concisely in short order so that I can know what you know without having done all the research and all the work that you had to do? Similarly, can you convey all of that publicly to lots of different kinds of audiences? In my journey, in one day, I've talked to high school students and heads of state and government. And it's the same information, but just conveyed in really different ways. So right now, if you feel like your writing isn't where you want it to be, or you're not very comfortable in front of different audiences, now is a great time to practice. You're in school, it's a safe space. It's really a great chance to work on those muscles so that you're ready to convey all of that in lots of different audiences, in lots of different formats. And again, in an ideal world, you'd be able to do that in a language other than your native language. To be able to convey information in multiple languages is such a key skill. It's going to help to set you apart from lots of other people competing for those job opportunities. Related to that is the language of information. For some of you, that might be the quantitative piece, the actual math of knowing what data tells you and understanding how to manipulate it, how to visualize it, how to explain it to others. But for all of us, the mathematically inclined and the less mathematically inclined, really being able to sharpen your analytical skills, to look at a situation, to see what's working, to see what isn't working and needs to be fixed, to see what lessons can transfer from one situation to another. All of that analytical toolkit is really critical. If you're not the math person, being able to understand what the quantitative math people are telling you, really being able to fundamentally unpack and evaluate a situation is one of those key skill sets that you're going to use in all of those different parts of your professional journey. It's part of being able to convey information, but it's a different set of muscles that you need to work on. And we'll talk in a minute about some different ways you can sharpen those skills too. What you see here on the screen as understand project management is just a way of talking about how you can make an idea a reality. Can you move something from point A to point Z? Can you harness the human and the financial and all of the other resources that are needed to move an idea forward? And this is going to be true while you're a student, it's going to be true in your professional life, all of those different elements that come together to make you able to deliver on something that you think of or that somebody else thinks of. So that's really what's meant by the project management piece. And the last part that's a critical skill set is having a group of people around you who can support you, who can give you information. I know lots of times we talk about networking and it seems like a very obtuse and kind of scary idea, but there's lots of different sources of information that you can draw on. It's the staff, it's the faculty, it's your classmates, it's fellow alumni from Tufts. All of these different people can inform you in the decision-making that you have, tell you about opportunities, open your eyes to different possibilities. All of that support structure is the network that I'm talking about here, and as a way to help you continue to advance in your professional journey. Now, there's lots of different ways for you to get these key pieces. On the professional experience front, for those of you, especially those of you who are earlier in your journey, thinking about internships, thinking about how your work study or other things you do on campus may fit into that professional skill set, the professional development of how it is to be and behave in an office. Those are key pieces. If even the seniors, if you haven't had a chance to have an internship yet, thinking about that last semester that you have and how you can expose yourself to that experience is really a key piece. And for those of you who are earlier in your journey, definitely building that in. On the writing front and the language front, thinking about building study abroad into your journey, whether it's a short-term experience or a whole semester or a whole year. If that hasn't been part of your experience yet, maybe a fellowship after you graduate. All of these pieces not only give you the international exposure and the cross-cultural exposure, but they force you to sharpen your writing. They force you to sharpen your presentation skills, because that's typically part of the process of applying for a fellowship or a study abroad program. In a similar way, applying for Peace Corps or AmeriCorps can, even if you aren't successful in your application, it shows your project management skills because you had to harness all those pieces. It shows your writing skills, it shows your communication skills in the interviews. All of these are ways to work on and build those muscles even if you aren't able to or aren't successful in your application. The same thing is true as you think about the analytical and the quantitative muscles that you need to build. You're going to do this as a student in your coursework. Maybe you take that piece that you wrote that you're so proud of and you shop it out to an undergraduate journal and you try to get it published, or you share it with a professor and a faculty member and you use that as an analytical tool to unpack and understand a particular situation or a part of the world. All of these are things you can do now as part of your studies, as part of your time as a student, to build and work on those skills. And as a complement to that, you can do it in volunteer roles, whether it's local, global, online, and we can talk about some of the sources of those kinds of opportunities. All of this is going to help with your writing, with your presentation skills, with your analytics, and with those basic project management and professional development tools. On the network front, I talked a little bit about some of the immediate circle around you, but there are a ton of young professionals groups that you can access locally with World Boston, nationally with young professionals in foreign policy, women of color advancing peace and security, lots of different groups and ways to expose yourself to a circle of people who have information that you may not have yet. So again, these are really easy ways for you to work on those key skills, no matter what kind of career you want to have going on down the line. I'm not naive, no, we're in a very unusual moment in global history with the pandemic. So some things may not be as available to you as they were before, but a whole separate set of doors has opened up for you that may not have been possible beforehand. There are so many more remote internships and remote volunteering opportunities than there ever used to be. Things that would have required you to be in New York or DC or Geneva or Tokyo now are available to you in your jammies, in your dorm room, in Medford. All of this is possible in a way that it just simply wasn't before. There's also a lot more going on in and around your town and community than there might have been previously, and a lot of ways for you to capitalize on those things. For those of you who maybe have language skills, we know of lots of local hospitals or police forces that are looking for people with language skills to help bridge gaps between different communities. For those of you who have good, strong writing skills or want to work on their project management skills, those of you interested in international economics, there might be small business groups that are trying to work on trade and export regulation, and they need volunteers and interns and staff to support that work and understand what the market in Canada is like for that local business in and around Medford. All of those different pieces. We see this with local police forces who are trying to combat human trafficking, and they're looking for folks who want to work with them to support victims, to break the cycle of these things, to support people who've been freed from human trafficking. Lots of this going on at the local level. So many different things you can do in your community, even in this unusual moment that we have. And again, if it's not possible to do some of that interpersonal contact for health reasons, for scheduling reasons, you can take the work you're already doing as a student and think about how you use it to position your professional development. Writing a blog, publishing your research, working with a faculty member on a particular topic or challenge. All of these are things that you can do as part of the life of being a student and get some professional skill sets out of them. If free labor is not necessarily in the cards, which I totally understand, there may be the possibility to do things like freelance projects, which are usually short-term, really focused things that you can do, often for money, that you would be able to write a piece, edit something, translate something, move a project forward. And again, often these things come with financial compensation. Similarly, there might be contract work that you can do, but instead of one project, it's for a set period of time for you to deliver on certain things. So again, it lets you sharpen all of those different skills we've talked about while often coming with some financial compensation. And I talked a little bit about some of those different international groups and young professionals groups that you can be involved in. Another side benefit of the pandemic is that lots of events now are being broadcast online. Lots of groups have moved to a virtual space. So you can be a part of an event in DC, in Geneva, in Tokyo, that before you would have had to physically be in that location to attend. And you can hear how the speakers talk about an issue. You can hear what arguments they're making. And then you can follow up with those speakers. and say, oh, I saw your session on, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I really liked your point about this, and I was curious about that. Can I come and talk to you? And it lets you have an easier way to start to build relationships with people that you may not have been able to interact with before. So all of this is possible during the pandemic in a way that several years ago, it would not have been open and not have been available to you all. So again, lots of ways to build those 5 key skills, even in this very weird moment that we happen to find ourselves in. I want to talk very briefly, because I'm sure you get lots of this from the Career Center, and then I want to open up to whatever questions might be most beneficial to you all. But because the application pieces are so very important, I just want to spend a little bit of time as an employer talking to you about these key pieces. Every organization is going to ask for something different. So at a bare minimum level, for the love of God, follow directions. You would be amazed how many people can't do that. And so that will immediately separate you from all of the other people who cannot handle that very basic step of following directions. On the whole, many organizations will ask for a cover letter, a resume, or a CV. They are different things, and different employers have different expectations and styles. So really understand what you're being asked to provide. A resume for a job with the US government is really different than a resume for a job with a nonprofit. So be sure you have a grasp of what those different pieces are and what you need. In some cases, you might need transcripts, either straight from Tufts or from whatever other organizations you've attended. Maybe you did community college first, maybe you studied abroad and directly enrolled. Not everybody is going to ask for it, but if they are, you need to plan ahead. Particularly during COVID, some of those timelines for processing are a lot longer than they used to be. So being sure that you build in enough time to ensure that it gets turned in on time is really important. A lot of places are going to ask for a writing sample. So if you have that paper that you're really proud of, or a subsection of something that you think is really a great showcase for what you're capable of, start to flag those things now. Maybe it's a paper if you're graduating from 2 years ago, but there's a really great couple of pages. Most writing samples are 2 to 5. So maybe you need to take that and add a little beginning so that it flows in well, and add a little bit of an ending so that it closes out well. But you have a couple of pieces in your portfolio that you can draw on when you need that writing sample. Maybe it's something you wrote for the student newspaper. Maybe it's a briefing memo you had to do for class. Having these things in your back pocket is really important so that you don't have to write something new or go, oh God, I'm a senior, I have 4 years worth of schoolwork that I have to go through, and I don't know what paper it was, and I don't know what pieces these are. Doing this as you go is a really critical step so that you're ready when people ask for these things. And we'll talk about references in a minute, but particularly for those of you who are nearing the end of your journey, thinking back about which faculty, which staff you want to stay in contact with is really important. So that 5 years from now, you don't go, oh gosh, what was her name? The girl from the Career Center who liked me. What? Oh, Cheryl, yeah. But it's been 5 years since you've talked to her. She has no idea what you've been up to. She has no point of reference for that reference to tell an employer anything about you. So picking a few people from the past that you want to make sure you stay in contact with, and we'll talk about some strategies for that in a minute. Cover letters are a tricky beast, and I know that. But at the heart of them, cover letters are not about you. Cover letters are about me as the employer, and they're how you are going to tell me why I should pick you and how you're going to help me be better in my work. And so I really recommend a 5-paragraph model that drives home why you are the one I should choose to make my work better. First paragraph, short and tight. This is the job I'm applying for, and then some summary sentence that convinces me to keep reading. Most applications, I'm looking for reasons to delete candidates. So you get a very quick skim, delete, and then I'll pay more attention to later. Skim, delete, skim, delete. So open strong. Give me a quick summary, just like a newspaper article, that tells me why I should keep paying attention. So that first sentence, that's a bit about you. The middle couple paragraphs, that's about me. How is your experience linked to what I want as articulated in the job description? And how are you connected to making my work better. So if I ask for this and this and this, you unpack that in your cover letter. Here's how you've done those things, or here's how you're able to contribute to my work. And then the ending piece might be if there's a particular issue you need to deal with. Oh, I live in Massachusetts. This job is in Mexico City. I realize I have to move, et cetera, et cetera. And then you close out by talking about what we can do together. I really think my work is going to make you better at widget making. Can't wait to talk to you. Thank you. Name. So that 5 piece, a little bit about you, the meat about me, and then you close out about what we can do together, I find makes a stronger cover letter because it links all of these things that I'm asking for in the job description to how you are going to help me do them. And that's the interrelationship that's really critical in a job application. A resume lives together with the cover letter, but fulfills a slightly different purpose. You're never going to know whether the person on the receiving end of the application is going to look at your resume first or your cover letter first. So they have to live symbiotically together. I'm a resume reader first because I'm not going to bother reading whole sentences if your resume has nothing to do with the things that I've asked for. I have colleagues who are cover letter readers first because if you can't put a complete sentence together, why the heck would they bother with your resume? You never know if you're going to get me or if you're going to get one of my colleagues. So they have to live together and they're still grounded in what that job has asked for. At this stage in your journey, it should be 1 page, and this is a hill I will absolutely die on. If your resume is 2 pages because you're telling me about what you did in like the 4th grade, unless you're applying to the Association of Amazing 4th Graders, I don't care. I don't care. It's not relevant. It's in the way of me finding the things that I need about that particular job that I'm hiring for. So 1 page, this early in your career journey. It should absolutely be free of spelling mistakes and grammatical mistakes and typos and errors. And it's a good idea to let somebody else take a look at it just to make sure that all of those things you think you're conveying actually come through clearly. It should be in reverse chronological order. Again, these are fundamentals, but a lot of folks mix and match, or they do it oldest to newest. And if I'm skimming and trying to move quickly, I'm expecting it to have the most recent things, which for most of you is going to be your education, up at the top. It should be short, tight. I don't need War and Peace. I need quick bullets with key details and the things that you've done. And it's okay to look to the job description to figure out where those pieces are. So give me the who, the what, the when, the why, how many. If you are a barista at the local coffee shop and you served 300 customers every day during rush hour to generate $10,000 in sales, that's a great example. It's grounded in who and what and how much and how often. I know you can handle a busy workload. I know that you can keep track of money and keep track of details. All of that is really grounded in relevant pieces to the kinds of things that I may be asking you to do. So the resume, again, should be short and tight and grounded in specifics. And that doesn't always mean numbers. If you're teaching 4th graders math and science, those are details. Who, 4th graders, what, teaching, what subjects, math and science. All of those are key pieces that can come out in your resume to help me measure you against what I'm looking for as an employer. If you are lucky enough to get an interview, please be sure and do at least some homework. You should look at the details that the company provides, not just in the job description, but read their About Us section. Read their history if they have a separate page. Come to understand how they talk about themselves so that you can get a sense, again, of the kinds of things you want to bring forward in the interview. If you know who's going to interview you, look them up. Look them up on LinkedIn. See if anyone you know is connected to them. Be ready so that you can have that opportunity to do those connections again. Just like you did in your cover letter, just like you did in your resume, you need to showcase those points of connection between you and the people you're interviewing with. It might be schools you went to, sports you like, experiences you've had, things you're curious about. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that you share, but getting to know them, getting to know the organization is a really key piece to stand out positively in an interview. And I mentioned letters of recommendation, and I'll share in a minute a piece that I wrote with a few deeper and broader tips on letters of rec, but a couple of key pieces. Make sure, again, you have those relationships and you stay in contact with those faculty, with those internship supervisors, work study supervisors, people who really can attest to what you're capable of. It doesn't have to be the, Pope Francis doesn't have to write you a letter of recommendation. It doesn't have to be the president of the university, somebody who really can speak to you. I've read a lot of letters from very important people, and all that they can say is, Felix is nice. He came on time. Well, that doesn't help me. Tell me what you did. Tell me what kind of person you are. Tell me what you can deliver on. Those are the key things that I'm looking for in a letter of recommendation. And because of that, it's okay to give your recommenders instructions. First of all, you should definitely tell them that they're listed as a recommender. I get calls all the time, and it's not good for the candidate when I'm surprised that I'm their reference. But if this person knows, then you can say, I'm applying for a job that's really analytical focused. Could you talk about the project that I did in your class on this subject? Can you talk about the analysis I ran on this and that? Can you talk about how I better organized all of the scheduling at our coffee shop to do this piece and that piece and make sure we had better service? Remind them of the things that you've done with them and the reason you've asked them to be your letter of reference. Please, for the love of God, don't ask your mom or your grandma or your aunt. I'm sure they're lovely people. I'm sure they love you very much. That's really not the kind of reference that I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone who really can talk about your professional and your work life. So while your family loves you, I'm sure, that's really not the strongest recommendation that you can put forward. Lots of ways to get additional information, and I'm going to close out in just a minute and answer whatever questions I can for all of you. But I invite you to some of the many events that we at APSIA host throughout the year. We have a whole fellowships and scholarships directory on our website, where if you want to get some of those international experiences or see what kinds of funding is available to learn languages or go to graduate school or study abroad, many different possibilities there. All of our graduate schools have profiles on our website. We have a whole career guide that unpacks some of those issues I talked about earlier, and we'll have a chance to do that in a minute if you like. And then we have tons and tons of job and internship opportunities, remote and in-person, all over the globe, actively on our jobs board. And we put out as much of that information as we can across different social media channels. So we're trying to share as many different tools and opportunities as we can. And we also do a lot of storytelling. So as you're trying to figure out which pathway makes sense for you, maybe there's a great alum profile that you could read about, and it would open up a whole set of doors and issues that you weren't sure about in the past. As the Association for Graduate Schools, we also run a ton of events particularly focused on finding the right grad program for you. We have monthly drop-in hours where you can just come and we'll chat about whatever's on your mind. We have a monthly series called How to Apply to Graduate School that walks through a 12-month process for putting together a quality application. This Thursday, September 29th, we'll have 28 schools from all over the globe on our online recruitment fair. They're to talk to you, to hear your story, to answer your questions and help you figure out what kinds of programs make sense for you. And then we also run a series of small group conversations around key topics. So today at 4 o'clock, we'll have one on dual degree programs, whether that's a program in 2 countries or a JD and an MA or an MA, MD, any of those kinds of combinations. On October 3rd, we'll be talking about programs in national security. October 11th will be global communications and public diplomacy. We'll do ones on different regions of the world, all kinds of different ways for you to figure out if graduate school makes sense and how to find the right program for you. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I really look forward to answering whatever questions you have and the key things that maybe brought you here to make sure we can get you all the most you need out of this session. Cheryl, would you like to read questions or?
Yeah, well, first I just want to say thank you, Carmen, because that was so wonderful, so helpful, and so informative. And I'm sure a lot of the students here would agree. So we do have a couple questions that we can start with. I know, Carmen, actually, you also mentioned maybe showing us a few key things on the website. Did I make that up? I think you just said, oh, we can get into that in a minute. So maybe we could start with that. And then, yes, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and I'll actually call on some of you to ask your question.
I'm happy to go to the website, but I would love to do questions first to make sure we have enough time.
Great, let's
but
do
our
that.
website is just APSIA.org, and lots of other tools there that we can take a look at if we run out of questions.
All right, so let's start. So Eileen has a question about those freelance projects that you mentioned. So let's kick it off with Eileen. I'll have you unmute yourself and you can ask me your question.
Hi, so I was wondering about resources that you recommend for finding available freelance projects based in international relations. I'm familiar with a lot of the resources that you can use for freelance marketing, but less so for projects that are focused in international relations. I wanted to know what resources you recommended.
Sure. So off the top of my head, the UN has their online volunteer corps. So those may be unpaid projects. Occasionally, they actually have some financial compensation. It used to be unv.org, but if you give me a minute, I can find the full link. And that would be program management, translation, editing, all kinds of things that are going to use an international affairs toolkit. Some other institutions, nonprofits and multilaterals in particular, may have short-term consultancies or what they would call our requests for proposal or calls for projects that would have that freelance element to them. Oftentimes they're going to be for folks who have strong language skills or knowledge about a particular part of the world. So if you've studied abroad in a particular place or you have command of a particular language, that's really going to help you stand out while you're still a student. Some of them may be for folks who are 5, 8, 10 years later that have more management experience, but at this stage in your career, those are some good places. One other thing that usually happens in the summer, so we've missed that window, is what's called the Virtual Student Federal Service, the VSFS. And these are short-term projects that link students in particular with about 18 to 20 federal agencies around key topic issues. So I'll throw that one in the chat as well. And those, they have what's called Apply in July. So it being almost October, we've missed that window, but it's a good thing to look ahead to. So any of those kinds of opportunities are going to have that short-term target freelance focus to them.
Awesome, thanks, Carmen. And some students are asking about some of the resources you just mentioned that APSIA provides. How can we sign up for the monthly Zooms about grad school, and where can we find more information about the dual degree programs that you mentioned?
Sure, the shorthandiest way is apsia.org/events. That will list all of our upcoming thematic events, including today's dual degree program at 4 o'clock Eastern. It will have all of the dates for our monthly webinars and drop-in hours and the chance to sign up for all of those there. So apsia.org/events is the home of all of our upcoming activities.
Awesome, great. So everyone wrote that down, right? I think we have lots of links to it on our website as well. And also getting some questions from some of our underclass students in the group today, first years and second years, wondering about what are some good internships if you're really just starting out, or what kinds of opportunities to look for if you're a first year or a sophomore and it kind of feels like there's not as many opportunities for those class years.
So one of the key questions to ask yourself as you try to make that decision might be, do I want to spend more time with books or do I want to spend more time with people? And this might seem kind of a silly dichotomy, but it might help steer you in one particular direction or another. So if you prefer information, books, newspapers, articles, those kinds of components might draw you more into internships with a think tank, which are typically research-based organizations. It might draw you more to an internship with the intelligence community, where there's lots of reading and writing and less, depending on the sector, human contact. It might draw you more into what would be called risk analysis, where you spend a lot of time reading and watching another place to understand what the impact might be on a business. So lots of opportunities, even early career, if you have an interest in spending more time with information. And I say books, but you know, virtual stuff too, like all sorts of information-y kinds of topics and careers. And again, there's things you can do even in Medford if you're not able to go somewhere else at a particular time to access those opportunities. Some of the think tanks in Washington have started remote internship programs and will take earlier career folks, particularly those, again, who have an understanding of a key issue like economics or a key part of the world, and it can even happen as a freshman or a sophomore. If you prefer human contact, there's particularly more opportunities at the early career level. So in the greater Medford area, there may be opportunities through World Boston, the Boston Network for International Development, BNID, different events and opportunities. I mentioned local governments, even on campus, the International Student Services Office, the Study Abroad Office, chances for you to build those project management skills, have international contacts and interaction, the UN Association of the Greater Boston area, all of them have internships. And if the commute to Boston, I think it's like an hour and a half. It's not, I know it's not close, but all of these too may have a remote component to them. Some of them come with stipends. So ways to have those kinds of experiences, and a lot of them are geared towards early college professionals. So you'll be doing event management, you might be doing a lot of email writing or writing for the website, those kinds of different pieces, again, that let you sharpen those skills, but it's not going to be a more research information heavy focus like some of those other positions. So early career, thinking about the local groups around you, there might be refugee organizations. Obviously, Martha's Vineyard has been in the news a great deal lately, but there's a lot of local things going on. The International Rescue Committee may be working in your area, and they are happy and welcoming of folks, even early in their journey, to contribute to the work that they're doing. So in some cases, it's thinking about the problems you want to contribute to, but at another level, it's thinking about the kind of environment you want to be in, one that's more book heavy, one that's more human interaction-y, and then kind of following that pathway into finding what's closer to you. And I see lots of good links from Cheryl in the chat, where there's probably lots of local stuff too.
Yes, I'm linking to the page that Kelly curates on our website about international affairs, government, and law. And then I also link to our specific international affairs page that has lots of different links to learn more. There's a link to the APSIA page. I think that's like the first one. So you can find all those events and the career guides and the good info there. And different places to look for jobs, but also, like Carmen was talking about, this brainstorming process and coming up with the different ideas. That's something that you can do with both me and Kelly. If you feel sort of lost when it comes to thinking that through, schedule appointments with us, and we get to do that process together, right, and help you figure out what do you want to try. These have been really great questions. So are there other questions that you all want to ask? You can feel free to raise your hand. I can call on you. You can ask.
I see one here about the World Bank and those kinds of places.
Yeah.
So the multilateral space is, we lump everything together, but it really is quite diverse in terms of access to opportunities. So a place like the United Nations is very clear, and I will put what I think is their link in the chat to their jobs page. But for the UN, which is a huge, multifaceted organization, each of which has its own application process, but broadly speaking, they will translate what each of their job levels means. And on the whole, an early career opportunity at the UN is a master's plus 3 to 5 years. So for those of you who feel called to UN work, that's going to be a longer part of your journey than something like the World Bank, where they're more likely to hire directly out of undergrad. That's a different thing too from something like the multilateral development banks, like the Inter-American Development Bank or the African Development Bank or the Asian Development Bank. It's going to be somewhere between the UN and the World Bank, and the IMF too. Okay, So for those of you who have several years of experience, that too is going to be slightly different positioning. So I'll cover lots of different ranges. For those of you who are just graduating from college and wanting to compete for positions at a place like the bank, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. It's a bank, right? So they focus on particular parts of the world. So the skill sets you're going to need to build are going to be about finance or part of economics, a particular region of the world. In some cases, it might have a security element to it or a development element to it, but they exist in a very specific place. And even the bank is really 4 organizations in one. Early career opportunities at the bank are often short-term consultancies. So you need to be ready if they give you a 6-month contract at 5 months and 29 days to not know whether or not your contract is going to be renewed. It's a great work, but you just have to plan and budget for those kinds of things. You also have to keep in mind with any of the multilateral organizations that you are competing against a worldwide body of candidates. So there's 7 billion people on the planet. You know, that's a huge pool of humans to be competing against. So the things, again, to emphasize are what skills you have and how they connect specifically to one particular part of the bank, the part that focuses on less developed countries, the part that focuses on the International Finance Corporation, the part that focuses more on insurance. So if that's the end goal, thinking about what skills you build that contribute to that. There's plenty of financial institutions in the greater Boston area that you could do an internship with to have access to that. Root Capital is there if you'd rather do impact investing. I used to work with some amazing fair trade businesses that are combining trade and development. So how you build up that skill set and how it relates to those kinds of organizations is going to be a key set of linkages to build. If you have a number of years of experience, they're not going to care whether it's in the States or outside the States. They're going to care how that relates to the skill sets that they have. It's a global body. Your colleagues are going to come from all over the world. They're going to like that you have a non-US set of professional experiences to market. So again, for those of you who don't have that yet, thinking about your study abroad, thinking about whether you intern abroad or you can spend a summer working and doing projects somewhere else. So the key to standing out at the bank is partially about that comfort level with obtuse contractness and partially about how well you connect to the kinds of skill sets that they're going to be marketing for. Most of those junior level opportunities are going to come in the consultant space, which may down the line translate into a full-time opportunity. But that's the set of jobs on their page to focus in on. They do have a young professionals program if folks are under 32, but again, you're all amazing, I'm sure, but it is exceptionally competitive because you have a worldwide body of candidates that are bidding on those spaces. So the keys to the bank also is about connecting your work to the bank specifically. They get lots of applications where people just kind of throw spaghetti at the wall because they want to work for some global body, but the bank doesn't have to settle for that. They can choose people who want to work for them and understand what they do and connect their previous experiences to what they actually do. That was a way longer answer than you wanted, Rafita, but there it is.
No, that was so incredibly helpful, Carmen. And while somebody is formulating their next question, I just want to emphasize how much you've talked about skills here and really pulling out the skills you're developing, the skills you like and want to develop and connecting those to opportunities. And these skills are transferable, right? So there's no, right, I think Carmen has really wisely averted some questions about, you know, what is the right internship for first year or second year, or is, you know, what is the internship I should get if I want X in the future? Right. And Carmen, you can maybe just share a little bit more about this, but I want to emphasize to all of you how much she has just talked about developing the skills and then connecting those to the roles that that you want in the future, and that it doesn't necessarily have to be from, you know, a perfect or one ideal environment or another to get to where you want to go.
For good or for ill, that doesn't exist in our space in the same way that it does in other places. If any of you wanted to be a dentist, right? You study dentistry, you go and you get your degree, and then you're a dentist for 40 years, right? It's a fairly straighter line. Our space is so interwoven that it's hard to say X plus Y equals Z. which to me is great because the world is changing so fast that Z is going to look totally different when you graduate today than if you graduate from several years from now. So to me, the key question that I would put to all of you is not what job do you want, but what kinds of problems do you want to work on addressing? The world is screwed up in plenty of ways. There's lots of work to go around. So what kinds of questions get you interested? And it's not necessarily that you would only do that, but if you say to yourself, I'm interested in security, or I'm interested in development, or I'm interested in finance, the next question you push yourself on is, well, what do you mean by that? Well, when I say security, what I really mean is counterterrorism. Okay. And when I say counterterrorism, what I really mean is stopping people before they become violent extremists. Okay. Well, what I really mean is stopping teenagers from being radicalized by the things they watch on the internet in X particular country before they become radicalized, before they become terrorists, as a way to counter terrorism. So you challenge yourself to really peel back and sharpen the terms that you mean, and you can do this, sitting in your dorm room, whatever, pushes. And once you have that sense, okay, I want to stop teenagers from becoming radicalized. There's a whole ecosystem around that in the public sector, in the private sector, in the nonprofit sector, in the multilaterals. So there's not just one job there. There's a lot of possibilities, even within that more enclosed question that you want to work on. So challenging yourself to sharpen your terms will let you focus in on an issue, on a question, not one job that may or may not be there that you may or may not get.
That's great. And I want to clarify for you all too, that what Carmen is describing is not, it's not like a definitive one thing, right? So some of you might hear that and think, oh, I need to have one question or one passion that I want to investigate. Do not put yourself in that box. Of course, there are many questions and many interests that you have. And kind of refining down, this is really just one of many places you can start.
Absolutely. And some of it too is because our space is so big and everything is interconnected, it can feel really overwhelming. And my hope with having you do that exercise is to make it okay to say, I'd like more of this and less of that. Because for your own sanity, you won't be able to do it all. But you can weigh, like, I care more about this than that. Well, that's good. That's healthy. Let somebody else who cares more about that other thing expend energy in that direction and figure out that key basket of things, not single thing, that you really find an interest in and want to put your professional energy into. It's not a finite point. It really is like a whole ecosystem around stuff. So there's no one, I promise you, my career has been like this. There's no one job. It's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those interests and even the things you care about, it'll evolve over time. So you want to stay open to that evolution as well. So I think we have time for about one more question, maybe two, depending on time. So yes, anyone want to jump in with a last question for Carmen? You can put it in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question. So I have one, and if another one pops up, that's great. So Carmen, if you are a student, like if you're just getting started with exploring your interest in international affairs, maybe you're looking for an internship, maybe you're just thinking about a job, but you're just sort of at a point in the semester where you're getting started and starting to focus in, what's one piece of advice that you haven't already given that you want students to really take away from today? What should they be doing?
Oh man, that I haven't already given. I mean, my usual answer to that is go abroad. Do all that you can to go abroad. I would say
that's good to emphasize that.
It's truly transformative. I would say don't be afraid to try lots of different things. Internships are great for figuring out what you want to do and for also what you don't want to do. Some of the best internships I had were horrible. And I thought, sweet Mary, Mother of God, please never let me do that again. And that's really beneficial. again, for that sifting process between what things you want to spend more time on and what things you don't. So don't be afraid to try lots of different things, lots of different classes and internships and clubs and volunteer opportunities. You have that wonderful chance as a student to experiment, and you may find something you didn't even know was a complete home run. That's the right mix of questions and issues for you that you would have never otherwise been exposed to.
Great. That's so wonderful. Yeah, this field is so broad and so intersectional and so interesting. You can do lots of things, and there is no one right experience to try. It'll all help you get to wherever you end up wanting to go.
Absolutely. And we are here to help. I threw our website and my email again in the chat. So feel free to reach out. We'll have open drop-in hours on the 20th of October. That's our next one. So just show up if you've got questions. And we hope to see you all at some of our events if graduate school makes sense for this part of your journey.